You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we just had the final ruling that Donald Trump was waiting for in his D.C. case. Can you explain what just happened here with Judge Chutkan in D.C.?
Yeah, Brian, the last batch of evidence that Donald Trump desperately did not want us to see, Judge Chutkan just ordered it released. Now, our viewers may remember that Special Counsel Jack Smith filed this mega brief, 165 pages, laying out the crimes of Donald Trump in connection with all things January 6th. But the second, shoe to drop that we've all been waiting for is all of the evidence that actually supports what Jack Smith said in his 165-page brief. So the evidence looks like grand jury transcripts, the actual testimony of the Republican witnesses before the grand jury relating all of the evidence of Donald Trump's crimes, and FBI write-ups of witness interviews and, transcriptions of recorded statements, et cetera, all of the evidence. That was in what's called the appendix to Jack Smith's 165-page brief. So the open question was still whether Judge Chutkan was going to release all of the evidence for us to see. And Donald Trump's lawyers filed the same old tired objections, election interference. None of this should be released before the election. Well, she made short order of those arguments. She said basically in a 2-page order, look, I've told you all before, this litigation does not depend and will not yield to any election cycle. So she rejected Donald Trump's his protestations about nothing being released before the election. But here is the twist to this 2-page court order, Brian. She said, I'm going to go with Jack Smith's recommendations. I'm going to release it. But Donald Trump's lawyer said, okay, Judge, can you just stay, in other words, delay the release of these materials while we, quote, assess our litigation options? Sounds a little ominous because they don't have any litigation options left. Why is that? Because this kind of an order by a judge just simply unsealing certain court documents is not appealable. It cannot be appealed to the D.C. Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. So what are their litigation options? Why do they ask for this delay? But let me first not bury the lead. Judge Chutkan granted the delay. She said, okay, you want a delay of the release of these materials? You got it. I'll give you 7 days to assess your litigation options, and then I will release all of this evidence for the public to see. So there's only one litigation option that I can even think of, Brian, and it is a sure loser for Donald Trump, but it's called a petition for a writ of mandamus. That's a legal mouthful. But what it means is if a trial court judge goes rogue and does something the law does not allow, which is not what Judge Chutkan did here, but if they do, then a defendant can file a petition for a writ of mandamus, which is asking a higher appellate court to reverse what the judge just did because the judge had no legal basis to do what he or she just did. That is the last-ditch attempt that Donald Trump's lawyers may try to exercise, file this petition for this extraordinary writ to the D.C. Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the appeals court atop Judge Chutkan. So let them try, because I have a feeling it will be instantly rejected by the appeals court because Judge Chutkan was well within her authority. Indeed, she did exactly what I would expect a trial court judge to do. She ruled on the motion and she ordered the materials released, but she's bending over backwards and giving Donald Trump and his lawyers 7 days to see if they can come up with anything that might impact the release of this evidence.
So the long and short of this basically is that Donald Trump tried to block every single ounce of evidence that was about to be released by Jack Smith, including his 165-page filing against him outlining all of his criminality up to and including the events of January 6th, as well as all of the evidence supporting all of those claims, which include grand jury transcripts and on and on. Donald Trump lost all of those efforts to block the release of this stuff. Judge Chutkan released all of it to be released to the public basically between the October 1st and a week from today.
Yes. And here's so Donald Trump continues to be the biggest loser in court. I mean, there is no court case he has touched that he hasn't lost. But here's the thing. I am looking forward to reading all of this evidence, right? Because I'm a law geek. I want to read all the grand jury transcripts. But I don't suspect we're going to see a whole lot of new evidence or information in the appendix that we haven't already had previewed for us in the 165-page brief that Jack Smith just filed, because the brief is like the narrative. It's the story of Donald Trump's crimes, and all of the evidence in the appendix is the supporting evidence, interviews, and documentation that proves everything that Jack Smith put in his mega brief. So it's going to be interesting. I look forward to reading it, but I don't know that we're going to learn a whole lot of new information.
Glenn, at this point, because we're not likely to see the court itself actually litigate all of the claims that are contained within the 165-page filing. And the whole point of that, of course, is to litigate that to determine what constitutes an official act and what constitutes not an official act so that it could be protected under this bogus new notion of presidential immunity. But we're likely not going to see that until after the election. So at this point, isn't it true that the only way that what is contained within the 165-page filing is going to continue to do damage to Trump is what folks like you and I, for example, discuss when we're doing our videos? Otherwise, there's no more legal hearings, for example, that are going to take place regarding this 165-page filing.
Yeah, Brian, you're exactly right. I don't suspect we're going to see much more coming out in court hearings or even in court filings between now and November 5th, Election Day, with the exception that when we do see all of this grand jury testimony, there will definitely be information in there that wasn't contained in Jack Smith's brief. I don't expect it to be directly or sharply incriminating, but it may put some contextual meat on the bones of what we saw in Jack Smith's 165-page brief. So I still think there may be some things that we can learn. They may even be damaging to Donald Trump, even if only around the edges. But I think you're right. You know, in the main, the evidence is now in. And here's the good news. Even though there will be no further jury seated in a courtroom in any of Donald Trump's prosecutions between now and Election Day, we, the people, have made it through jury selection. We have been selected as the last jury standing between Donald Trump and dictatorship. And we get to go to the polls and not only vote for Kamala Harris on November 5th, we get to go to the polls and vote Donald Trump guilty on the evidence we have seen.
That's a great point. And I would just add to that for those who are watching right now, and I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you've heard me make this public service announcement before, but if you have the ability to vote early, either in person or by mail, do it. The campaigns know whether or not you voted. If they are tracking you, they know whether or not you voted. They don't know who you voted for, but they know if you've cast your ballot. And so help these campaigns by casting your ballot right away. This way they can use their limited resources, all of that money that they've worked all of this time to get from millions of people across this country. Let them use that money, that personnel, to focus on people who are actually undecided or who may actually be deciding between whether they want to go out to the polls or just stay on the couch. These are important groups that we need a lot of money to be able to reach. And so help the campaign by making sure that you are not one of those people, that they're not wasting valuable resources on you. If you're watching this, presumably you understand the stakes in this election. So do your part here. Get your ballot in early. Go and vote early, and make sure that those campaigns can focus their energy elsewhere. With that said, as far as Donald Trump's filing is concerned, we will, of course, stay on top of this as soon as we have any updates. So if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen, and that is the best way to support both of our work. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.